Hello, I'm Darren Berry, and this is my presentation for the Artist for Artist project on William Hogarth, engraver and painter, famously known for his social commentating. He was born November 10th, 1697, and then he died October 26th in 1764. I'll briefly explain his history so you can understand a bit about him. Hogarth's father was a teacher. His family had struggled for money. His father, Richard, went bankrupt and went to debtor's prison. Through Hogarth's early life, he never liked studying. He was smart enough, he just never took to it. He spent more time learning about life and art. He'd watch the streets of London and sketch the characters he saw. His father, while supportive, didn't know how to help his son progress in life with his chosen path. Some speculate this was also because of Richard's imprisonment. Hogarth sought out an apprenticeship in silversmithing at 15. Here, he learned engraving through his teacher. He learned engraving though his teacher didn't give him adequate education, which was his second event of many, being disappointed and choosing to study alone. He continued to study the world and enjoyed visiting theatre and brothels. At 23, Hogarth opened his own engraving shop. During this time, he also took up drawing classes, though he found he didn't enjoy typical life drawing classes as it felt too similar to normal study. He returned again to self-led study. During this time in London, money was hard to come by, especially for someone like Hogarth having come from a poor family. To make some extra money, he began some book illustrating and found he didn't mind it too much. Still wanting education in art, he found James Thornhill, an English artist who practiced the Italian Baroque style. At the time, he had just opened his second academy. Hogarth was desperate to make Thornhill respect him and created masquerades of operas to show he had something to say about the world. Soon after he started publishing his pieces, he began to make enemies, as any social commentator will. Hogarth began painting after he felt he had a sufficient education under Thornhill. He was confident in his abilities and began a commission from Joshua Morris, a tapestry weaver. Morris felt the product wasn't finished and refused to pay Hogarth for his art. This outraged him, and he decided to sue Morris for his rightfully earned money. This was unusual for the time, as artists were mostly either very high in society or extremely low, and seen as servants who shall do what you wished. Morris saw Hogarth as the latter. Despite all this, Hogarth won the case. After this, in 1728, he created his first dated painting, A Beggar's Opera, which perfectly recreated the scene of the farcical play Otherset. In 1729, Thornhill became Hogarth's father-in-law when he eloped with James's daughter, Jane. Hogarth plateaued for a few years, making conversation pieces and all right money. He preferred his humorous, realistic scenes that preached morality. This is what he became famous for, with his signature large expressions and commentary. This gave him financial stability, which I'm sure he was proud of, considering his past. One of his works was A Harlot's Progress, published 1732, which was a series about prostitutes that showed them as innocent and targeted. Many fake copies were made, which he, again, wanted to take legal action against. This was more difficult than the one-on-one dispute, as it was against many unnamed copiers. We still face this same issue today with unfair selling of art on sites like Redbubble, where someone will take a piece of art, not reference or pay the artist, and sell their art as stickers, clothing, or even just prints. In March 1734, Hogarth and many other artists went to Parliament and created the Engravers Act, also sometimes called Hogarth's Act, which is similar to copyright now. He wanted to publish more pieces, but he wanted to wait until the Engravers Act was law, which was in June 1735, about a year later. In 1734, Thornhill died at 58. In response to this, Hogarth reopened his father-in-law's old drawing school, but taught differently, encouraging artists to share and discuss more. Soon after the previously mentioned Engravers Act was in action, Hogarth released a series of paintings, A Rake's Progress, which was extremely popular, becoming a ballet in 1935, a film in 1945, and an opera in 1951. He was elected as a governor of St. Bartholomew Hospital, founded in 1123, and still running today. Now there is a museum that's currently closed, expected to reopen in 2024, with some of his work. During this time, he painted 2 large canvases to be put on the walls, which were often mistaken for murals. To give a sense of size, the characters in these paintings were 7 feet tall. As a student of life who had watched the public for his whole life, he chose to use the patients as reference for his characters. He specifically requested no one ever varnish it, which was later done against his wishes. During his life, he also paid for the cleaning and upkeep. After this, he spent a while doing portraiture, where he painted his self-portrait with his dog labelled The Painter and His Pug in 1745. Excuse me. In the early 1750s, he continued to paint, but began struggling to finish the pieces. The public also began to lose interest at auctions. In 1753, he released a book called The Analysis of Beauty, where he described his theories of physical attractiveness. He was mocked for this. In 1757, he became sergeant painter to King George III. He painted Sigismunda mourning over the heart of Guiscardo, her murdered husband. This garnered lots of criticism, as he was trying to prove an English painter could be just as good as an Italian painter. He didn't paint much after this. He created a print series coming out against the 7-Year War, which at this point was in Year 6. People were outraged. Politicians publicly and vocally criticised him. His last etching came in March 1746, the Bathos. This was meant for the end of a bound collection of his work. And finally, in the summer of 1764, he had a seizure and remained ill until his death on the 26th of October, where he was 67. Excuse me. This was the piece I mentioned earlier about him advertising his own engraving shop. It's one of his first dated pieces, though I have forgotten to write the date here. And it really just shows what he can do. It's showing his lettering, showing his pride in his figures that he liked doing, and his metaphors with old, like, these are, I forget the word. I'm gonna move on. This was his, no, I'm not very good at saying this word, emblematical print on the South Sea scheme, and it was painted in 1721, published 1724. It's all about inflation, corruption, and stock investors, which I'm not amazingly knowledgeable about, but I did a bit of research, and basically what had happened is there was a monopoly going on, and a lot of stock investors were very poor because of it, and a lot of wealthy people who knew about it were very rich because of it. And there was a thing called an economic bubble, which made the poor very poor and the rich very rich. And this piece was made as a response to foreign artists. For example, a monument dedicated to prosperity by Bernard Picard, who's a French artist. This scene is placed in London with characters of demons, rituals, and a wheel of fortune. It's a comment of greed and luck. There's also a statue of Gog on the left in front of the devil, telling the prophecy of the end of days. And there's a monument on the left with... Oh, sorry. There's a monument on the right. I meant to write there. Monument on the right with fighting foxes above. I find this piece very interesting because I think it'll capture my mouse. This guy is a very scary devil, and people know about him and they see him. And then that leads us to see these women, I assume, to be trying to get up to the Wheel of Fortune, where few are, and they seem to be enjoying themselves and can't be touched by the public. And there's rituals going just under their noses. They see it, but they don't care. And then this says, the monument was erected in memory of the destruction of this city by the South Sea Scheme, 1720. This was a very current etching, and people cared about it. And also, these foxes are fighting, and they seem to be scared of each other, as everyone here is fighting for anything. But yeah, I think this is very interesting, that there's just signs of the poorest of the poor everywhere, and people trying to do what they can to survive. Anyway, let's move on. This was a painting and an etching that has a couple differences. Like, if you notice that he has glasses in this one and he doesn't in this one, and he holds his pen differently. This one, oh, if you can't see my mouse, I'm not sure if I've done this right. In the painting, he looks like he's ready to start writing. In the etching, he seems more relaxed and like he didn't want to start painting or writing, sorry. And people believe that the etching is more so what Hogarth wanted. But yeah, so this is the bench. The published engraving was in 1758, but he kept retouching the painting until his death. The meaning behind this painting, not the meaning of the painting, is that Hogarth was being called a caricature artist. And unfortunately, he's still being called that today, and I'm describing him in this presentation as one. Because that is kind of what he is, but he hated this. He, quote, said, "Hardly any two things are more essentially different than character and caricature. Nevertheless, they are usually confounded and mistaken for each other." He saw himself as a view of character. The people he painted what he saw inside them, whereas I'll later get into another artist who I feel is more of a caricature artist. The meaning of what's in the painting, though, is these are a set of 4 judges who just don't care about the case that they are judging for. There's 2 seemingly asleep, 1 just looming ahead, and the one in front just is generally disinterested. And I find, interestingly, in the etching, I find that the faces above them all are the people in the audience who are being judged, and they're all like gaunt looking faces with quite silly looking structures. And I think that's how how the judges view the people in the extremes. This is the aforementioned Beggar's Opera. From 1728 to 1731, he painted 6 different versions of this. The same scene, he just wanted to get it right. This was a scene based on a man called John Gay's play, first performed in 1728 at Lincoln's Inn Theatre. Excuse me, I'm ill. So in this painting, there is a man in the middle who is a highwayman, and I'll read what I've written so I don't repeat myself. The two women are not only the daughters of the jailer and the lawyer. The jailer is this one with the keys, and the lawyer is this one on the right in the fancy dress. Jailer and the lawyer, but also the lover and wife of the man in the middle, the wife being the one in white. The man in the middle who is sentenced to death because of his life as a highwayman. This was in Act 3, Scene 2 of the play. I think this is another very interesting piece, as it's very clearly in the jail, and these two women are begging, and the guy's face is quite funny, because he's kind of giving just a look of, I don't care. And I like that. And there's everyone looking but not caring. And that's something that Hogarth really tried to portray, the lack of care of the public. Now this is Marriage à la Mode, painted between 1743 and 1745. And long story short, it satirized arranged marriage. I really like these pieces, and I'm so surprised he managed to do it all in 2 years. So, it tells a story beginning in Scene 1, the marriage settlement. Left to right, I'll name the people. It features the son of bankrupt Earl of Squanderfield, daughter of a wealthy city merchant, lawyer Silvertongue. I use my mouse. Son, daughter, lawyer, 3 usherers, and lastly, the Earl. The son and the daughter are being arranged to marry so that the Earl may have the money to build his mansion that can be seen through the window. Some things that I had noted for me to talk about is storytelling through painting. The son is looking off to a mirror, clearly showing that he doesn't particularly care about the situation. He's just happy that it's happening. But he's also got, again, another word I'm not amazing at, a syphilitic sore. It's syphilis. And this shows that he's not pure, whilst the woman next to him, who's marrying him, is dressed in white, which has always been a very clear symbol of purity, especially with her rosy cheeks, making her seem like a child. The Earl, the father, is pointing at his family tree, and I found some sources say that this is him pointing to the fact that he's related to William the Conqueror, which I believe is him showing that, hey, I'm important, I should get what I want. One of my favourite imagery in this painting is the 2 chained dogs here. There's the one looking into the same direction as the sun, and the other one looking so sad and depressed, and just, this is a terrible fate for the 2 future husband and wife. And I also wrote the daughter with the handkerchief and the paintings. Oh, the daughter was the handkerchief. The handkerchief is a sign that she won't be happy, and she's playing with it to distract herself, but she won't be happy. She's already not happy. And the paintings in the background, there's this one directly above her that is screaming. And then there's the one sort of in the same pose as the Earl, who's looking all pompous and like he owns the place. So yeah. Oh, what have I done here? There we go. Scene 2. Again, French, I'm not amazing at. The tete-a-tete, or shortly after the marriage. Here in this scene, they sit further from each other. This signals signals their distance in their marriage. Servants hold unpaid bills, and the house is clearly a mess. Both wife and husband seem to be partaking in adultery by her stance and loose hair. I forgot to correct that. Loose hair. And his dog finding a lady's cap in his pocket. He also has a sword at his feet, showing he may have been in a fight or to show that there is hostility nearby. I personally believe that the statues represent those who arranged the marriage, as they're watching over, and particularly this one in the middle seems to be the Earl, showing how sad he would be if either one had broken up with the other. This is a very simple scene, but it shows a lot of interest, I think. Scene 3, the inspection. Now this is a hard one. The meaning of this painting is argued still. The facts are that the husband has visited a fraudulent doctor for his previously mentioned syphilis. Some say he's returning some mercury pills that didn't cure him. Others believe he's infected the young woman, who is the daughter of the angry woman, who is putting on her anger to gain a discount from the doctor. And the reason they believe that the young woman has syphilis is because she's wiping her mouth, which she may have a sore on her mouth, which is an early sign. And I think this is immediately quite an early reference of death incoming, as I believe that the exponential change between the young woman just beginning syphilis, the son of the Earl having just one spot, and the woman having 2 spots. It shows that it grows. Scene 4, the toilet. The Earl has passed on, making the husband the new Earl and the wife the Countess. She seems to be in an affair with the lawyer Silvertongue, signalled by the toddler pointing at the horns of a statue. Again, Actaeon, not sure, who is a symbol of cuckoldry and viewing another naked when they should not have. The background paintings have similar messages from the story of Lot and his daughters, Jupiter and Lo, and the rape of Ganymede. This one is another very interesting one. I haven't written about it, but Hogarth always paints coloured people as innocent people or kind people. He has never had any sort of racist intentions, which I think is quite rare to see in these type of paintings. But yeah, just a fun little interesting bit. And I really like this scene because it's so playful, but the husband isn't there, so it sort of makes us feel like we've been let into something that he hasn't. Scene 5, the Bagnio. Shortly after this scene, the Earl has discovered the Countess in a masquerade brothel with the lawyer Silvertongue. The lawyer stabs the Earl in his side with the sword that's now on the floor covered in blood, then flees through the window. The Countess begins to beg for forgiveness as her husband is dying. This one I found one of the simpler ones of the 6. I think it's very clear what it's trying to tell. I think even just the people coming in at the door, that took me a while to realise that they were there. It's not really showing much. It just sort of shows that they're shocked. But yeah, that's the story. And scene 6, the lady's death. The widow decides to commit suicide in grief of her husband and lover, Silvertongue, who was hanged for the murder. Excuse me. The interest in this piece is of the child who gives a kiss to the dead lady with another black spot on her face. This shows that the curse of this story will be brought to new generations, never ending. The late lady's father takes off her ring as it's the only thing she had left behind. I believe the starving dog stealing from the table is also a sign of the innocence of everyone in the scene, doing what they can to get by, no matter what the morality. Away from marriage a la mode, this is the 4 stages of cruelty, another one of Hogarth's interests. Hogarth created these 4 copper plates to illustrate the story of unkind children becoming abusive adults. It tells how cruelty to animals leads to moral degeneration and murder, a warning against immoral behavior. Excuse me. The teachings are that if one starts by antagonizing small animals, they'll begin to seriously hurt more beings, leading to murder, then finally one will get justice. In the 3rd plate, which is the bottom left, one character murders his girlfriend after making her steal some jewels. He is then arrested by an angry mob. The same character is then hanged and seen being dissected, rope still around his neck in plate 4, the bottom right. I think this is an amazing message, and Hogarth loved animals. That's why he painted The Painter and His Pug. He loved his dog and he loved animals. And yeah, there's lots of very disturbing imagery in this one, but it's an amazing message of if you start a bad habit or a bad mindset, it'll continue to something worse. But yeah, there's lots of murder in this. There's like obvious ones. There's the guy antagonizing the dog here, there's the guy beating the horse, there's the murder of the girl, and there's the dissection. But everyone, like all of Hogarth's pieces, there's always more going on. Like there's I believe a dog eating a cat, I'm not completely sure. There's a guy picking up a chicken. There's some boys fighting over, again, I think it's a dog. There's a guy killing a sheep. There's a guy being run over, in fact. I think that's a boy, in fact. And I'm not sure I found much in this scene other than the murder of the girl. But I'd love to be told I'm wrong. And in this, there's the dog eating the intestines, which is quite gruesome. The analysis of beauty... Oh, don't do that. The analysis of beauty in 1753. Hogarth outlined 2 main things in this book: the line of beauty and the 6 principles: fitness, variety, simplicity, intricacy, quantity, and greatness. These principles remind me of the love languages that we've recently outlined: words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, gift giving and receiving, and physical touch. And Hogarth goes into detail of why each of these principles is important. For example, fitness was all about being caring about yourself and active. Greatness referred, I believe, to just a sense of betterment and feeling like something is something to strive for. And there's a lot more. The line of beauty is something that quite interests me. It's seen in the picture here at the bottom with the 49 at the top. It's a theory that parallel lines and right angles signify stasis and death, whereas lines that are S-shaped or irregular are exciting and lively and attract attention. However, he also believed that for something to be beautiful, it would need both types of line, as to not destroy its simplicity, but also keep variety. And I think that's extremely interesting, that he thought that a parallel line may signal death, but it was needed to be beautiful. Because I think that's very true in all things. Like, no one you love will be around for very long, and nature won't be the sun will explode, and that's beautiful. That there's this overlooming sense of death, in my opinion. I read quite a lot of existentialism. Onto a sadder note, the bathos. This was painted March 3rd, painted? This was engraved March 3rd, 1764. It was his last piece. Well, he was continuing with the bench, but last posted piece that it was finished. Bathos, as a word, is a literary term for an absurd anticlimax in literature. The winged figure is Hold on. Before I begin with that, I think that this is very interesting that he's named it the absurd anticlimax in literature, as he had finished up all his work. This was the end piece of a bound book that he was going to make for all of his works. And surely he had figured out that this was going to be his last. And this whole picture screams the end of time. Anyway, the winged figure is reminiscent of the Fallen Angel by French painter Alexandre Cabanel. I don't believe this character is Icarus, as is in Fallen Angel, but I think it holds the same message, as he sits on symbols of broken time pieces and crumpled paper. Hogarth feels his time is coming, and he was right. This is admittedly my favourite piece of Hogarth, and I think I would still love this even if someone had just shown me it today without me learning anything about his life. There's so much. The figure is saying finis, which basically means to finish, like it's the end point. There's the world's end with a world on fire, I believe. A dead tree. I might just be listing things, but there's so much like metaphors and just so much in this piece. And there's paintings or a picture or a print or something by his feet. And I find it so interesting that it's next to a flame, that he feels like all of his work is about to go up in flames and he's done. I was showing someone my work on this presentation, and they mentioned that the crack in the bell was something to do with American history. I'm not too much aware on that, but I would like to look into that further. Anyway, I'll stop gushing about this piece. I thought it would be interesting to look at the sort of area that was around in his life. He lived mostly with George II of Great Britain's reign didn't reign from this. He was born in 1683 and he died in 1760. He was the King of England for most of Hogarth's life. He was generally disliked as he was a German and the last monarch who wasn't British, barely even speaking English for most of his reign. In the 7-Year War, he argued with his son, and the people disagreed with much of what he did, siding with Prussia. He was so disliked, he didn't even get a monument. With such a disliked, I use disliked a lot here, with such a disliked and distant king in power, many believe this informed Hogarth's work, especially the ones criticising corruption and people of power. Although Hogarth didn't hold the same hatred toward King George II nationality, he actually quite liked foreigners, and I've mentioned this before. He quite liked foreigners as seen by the way he painted coloured folk, and how he studied the world. He loved people no matter where they were from. This is James Gilray. He was a printmaker and caricaturist. Oh, this is the person who I mentioned earlier, who I think is more of a caricaturist than caricaturist than Hogarth is. He was born 1756 and died in 1815. Gilray and Hogarth are often regarded as being the two most influential cartoonists in history. Gilray homed more into the political side of his work, whereas Hogarth's passion was more into society. I believe Gilray tended to be a bit offensive by today's standards, whereas Hogarth stayed true to life and avoided unnecessary exaggeration. Shown by this piece, which I think paints this larger woman in a very offensive light by today's standards, a sphere projecting against a plane. I mean, I think he was trying to be funny, but I think it just goes over my head. And a lot of these other paintings that he's done, prints, sorry, I'm not sure. I don't particularly like him, but everyone's not going to like someone. This is someone modern, Grayson Perry. This is the Adoration of the Cage Fighters, made in 2012. It's with a similar mind of Hogarth's. It replicates the large expressions, awareness of class differences, and the overload of information, with every character telling you a story of their own. I think it's very interesting how we can still learn from old artists and make new pieces with our new styles and our very interesting things we can say with them. And yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about this piece. For example, how the women on the right all have quite Barbie doll legs, except the one furthest on the right, who doesn't seem to fit in, as she's the shortest, the palest, and just doesn't seem to fit in, and she has a sort of sadder look to her. And the differences between class here are between the four women on the right and the one woman on the left. Although I believe that the artist was trying to say that the furthest right woman is actually of a lower class, but she's trying to fit in. And yeah, I think this is a very interesting piece. And the little dog in the bottom left reminds me a lot of that first painting, The Painter and His Pug. Anyway, I believe that wraps up my presentation. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learnt something. And goodbye.